Hello, everyone. This is Colin once again. We're continuing with the Gospel of Matthew, and we come now to the beginning of chapter 3, where we have now who comes into the narrative is John the Baptist. Now, John the Baptist is quoted, his first piece of dialogue, really, is a quotation where it is apparently prophesizing John the Baptist's initial function in the Gospel of Matthew. Now we read, it says, "In those days, John the Baptist appeared in the wilderness of Judea, proclaiming, quote, 'Repent, for the kingdom of heaven has come near,' end quote. This is the one of whom the prophet Isaiah spoke when he said, quote, 'The voice of one crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight,' end quote." So here we have Matthew actually doing us a favor. As we saw with the last video, he neglected to really mention any prophet, but here he specifically mentions the prophet Isaiah. Now, Matthew is trying to tell us that Isaiah prophesies John the Baptist by saying, "The voice of one crying out in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord, make his path straight." Now, I want to point out some clear distinction here. Matthew is obviously using the Greek Septuagint, okay, because of the word differences when we look at the original Hebrew in the Jewish Tanakh. Now, I point this out because let's look at what the Greek Septuagint says. It says, "The voice of one crying out in the wilderness." So, according to the Greek, the voice, the person, is supposed to be crying in the wilderness. And we know that Matthew actually characterizes John the Baptist based on these verses, or at least on his translation of the Greek, because of the fact that he has John the Baptist much like an archetype of Elijah, where he is wearing, basically sort of like beggar's clothing, eating what he can, and things like this, in the wilderness. And in fact, the whole theory that John the Baptist had some sort of connection to the Qumran community and the Ebionites, and essentially lived out away from Jerusalem and the temple, but out by the River Jordan in the wilderness, testifies to this is how Matthew characterized him. Now, let's look at what the actual Hebrew says. The Hebrew says, "A voice cries out, in the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God." Did you catch it? Let's look at the Hebrew one more time. "A voice cries out." Let's pause right there. So therefore, the voice actually has no distinct location. The voice is beyond location, at least in this out-of-context passage. A voice cries out, quote, "In the wilderness, prepare the way of the Lord. Make straight in the desert a highway for our God," end quote. So as you can see, according to the actual original passage in the Hebrew, the voice is not placed in the wilderness. Rather, the voice of whoever this is, out of the context, is essentially saying, in the desert, in the wilderness, is the path to God. And so here we have Matthew fouling up this verse. But see, can we really blame Matthew? Well, it's hard to tell. We know Matthew has fabricated verses. He has fabricated the genealogies and left people out, as we've seen in my past videos. But is this really Matthew's fault, or is this just his not really understanding of Hebrew? Which is striking, because if Matthew wrote the Gospel of Matthew, i.e. if the disciple Matthew wrote his Gospel, he was a Jew, and he would have understood the difference between the Hebrew text and the Greek text. But instead, whoever wrote Matthew was obviously not someone who understood Aramaic or Hebrew, but rather was a Greek-speaking individual and was basing his entire quotations from the Old Testament on the Greek Septuagint, which is dangerous considering the fact that the Greek Septuagint has all of these errors and issues, and the fact that the author based a lot of his character archetypes and his storylines, as I've illustrated, based on this flawed translation, again begs the question, inspired by a divine being or errors of a very human nature? Thank you for watching. Peace be with you all.